So one of the mistakes that a lot of runners make is just sort of training at intensities, and if you want to call it zones, you can call it zones, but almost pushing a little bit too hard. I think we often overestimate where our fitness is at the time because we're so focused on the end goal, we're so focused on what we say need marathon pace to be or 10k pace to be. You often just kind of neglect where you are right now, and maybe you end up sort of overdoing things quite a lot. So today we're going to do a bit of a sort of fitness test, and then I'm going to sort of talk you through how you might sort of do like something like this yourself. I'm going to keep an eye on heart rate, I'm going to keep an eye on pace, I'm also going to check lactates, but you don't need to do that. But I'm going to sort of talk you through how it went, how you could end up sort of doing a test like this yourself, and then why you'd want to sort of come back in maybe 4 or 5 weeks time, repeat the sort of same test, just to see if sort of things are moving forward. It's a way to sort of figure out where each zone is at that moment in time without having to go into a lab to sort of test that. But let's get stuck in. Okay, so one of the things about sort of checking in on your fitness, and also before I forget, you can like, you can subscribe, things you can totally do for free, really helps me, really helps the videos. You can also check out 262clo.com, that's my brand, helps support everything that I'm doing. But back to the fitness test. How I'm going to approach this, which is really good advice for you, is I'm going to do the first one but not really check anything. I'll obviously be checking heart rate and speed and all this sort of stuff, but I'm going to do it way slower than what I would normally hypothetically do the first test. And the purpose of that is just to sort of stabilize everything. Often when you check a lactate or sort of when you check heart rate, you can often go off a little bit too hard in that first rep, and you can end up making a mess of the entire test. So the test today will be 5 laps of the park. I'll keep it 1 lap, which is just over a mile, but that gives us a really fair place to come back and check again because we're not relying on GPS. So that's my sort of second tip. Make sure that wherever you're doing the sort of testing, you can come back and do it again, and you're not just relying on GPS. I would suggest that you have another metric, which is you've got your sort of GPS, which is speed. You definitely want heart rate. I would recommend a heart rate strap over just using the wrist heart rate. Heart rate strap. And that's sort of like really important. So the first lap that we're going to do, like I said, I'm not really testing anything. It's going to be much slower than normal. It's just to calm everything down, and it helps aid the warm-up. The warm-up was 2 mile. I did my sort of drills, did my stretching, did my sort of like pogo bounds, but this is sort of like an extended warm-up, and it just helps everything sort of calm down. Then we're going to go roughly 6 minutes per mile. Then we're going to go 540, then we're going to go 520, then 5 minutes. So that's roughly 340 per K, 330, 320, 307. I know that's quite big jumps, but all we're looking for really today is just like a where and sort of what pace and what heart rate are we totally in control. And then we'll sort of get to a place of that sort of like first threshold, and that's once we sort of sit around 2, and then we'll probably get to like my actual threshold pace, which is that sort of like half marathon-y type effort. And then I would imagine at 5 minutes per mile today, because my fitness isn't in a super place, that'll probably tell us roughly where reps should be. It's not going to paint an entire picture. You could probably do 8 laps, but it's going to paint a pretty solid picture. But let's get stuck into this sort of first lap. I'll let you know how it goes. Also, you will notice I'm wearing the nice new fancy pants, Puma, I think they're Nitro Elite 3, and we'll also sort of get an idea how they are, but let's get stuck in. Alright, so lap 1 done, heart rate sort of sat around sort of like 140, that's just that sort of like baseline 1 done. Now we're pretty much going to go at the same pace, we'll keep it the same, and we'll sort of, this time we will check lactate. I'll sort of tell you the heart rate at the sort of end of it and the sort of average pace or what it sort of was for the first lap. So the baseline 1's done, super important, calms everything down. We're going to take about a minute rest and then we'll go again. Alright, so first one's done. I would expect nothing less. Lactate's 1.2, that's why you go sort of really slow. It just sets that sort of baseline mark. So now we're going to go 540 pace. I would still expect the lactate to be low like that, but like I said, sometimes we overestimate where fitness is at, so we'll find out. Okay, so number 1, I sort of forgot to say, heart rate was sort of sitting about 145, 146. Rep 2 there, which was right at 540. Before I sort of go into it, be really sensible with your paces. You really don't want to sort of go too quick too soon, and once you start to pick it up, you need to be really sensible about that. But the heart rate was sort of 150, 151. Lactate's still low, like you can see, 1.3. That would probably suggest I'm still around sort of like zone 2. I'm probably not sort of in the sort of lower threshold yet, but it will likely get there now. So let's jump into this next one. Okay, so if we're to trust heart rate, it's now up to sort of 158, 159. I would predict that lactate will sit around 2. I was bang on 520 pace, bang on that sort of 320 per K. This should now be us at LT1 around sort of 2. The problem we're going to find is that now I'm going to go 5-minute pace and we might actually skip LT2, but we'll find out. Oh, that's almost like cheeky, 1.4. Kind of annoyed about that. I wanted it to be, yeah, maybe we won't skip LT2. All right, let's go. All right, so we'll do a little bit of a rundown. That was the final sort of rep there now. That was right around 458 per mile. Heart rate went up to 168, which ordinarily that will be like LT2 for me. You know, LT1's normally like 160 to 162, and then LT2, rather than sort of try to complicate this, LT1's a sort of effort that you should be able to keep going for, you know, quite a long period of time. Like you could be talking 3-4 hours if you're well trained and the legs can handle it physically. LT2, high end of LT2, that's roughly your sort of half marathon-y sort of area, or not half marathon, but 1 hour mark. And then as you come down that sort of LT2, which like pretend for me 165 heart rate to 168, I can nearly hold that for a full marathon. I usually average 168 to 170. If you're well trained, if you've done all the preparation, all that good stuff. So heart rate went up to sort of 168 in that last rep there. My lactate, as you can see here, is 2.8. Which, like I said, that's sort of what I would expect for LT2. I'm probably going to tell you that that's the highest end of LT2 for me at the minute, and I'm telling you that based on feel. So if I'm doing a mile there today and it's 458, if it's at the lower end of LT2, then I'm probably going to say something like, I felt pretty good, it felt pretty comfortable, I sort of know I could hold that. What would happen today if I actually tried to hold 458 for, you know, maybe 3 laps, maybe 4 laps, maybe 5 laps? I'm telling you right now, I'd have got tired and that lactate would have went up. So that's the sort of thing with like these fitness tests. They're telling you roughly where your sort of heart rate or you know, sort of lactate, like I checked, is after 1 mile rather than like 13 mile or 26.2 mile. And so you almost have to take it as a, not just a pinch of salt, but like bear in mind that like 168 heart rate, if you're then going to use that in training, you're going to use the data. You need to be looking at, if I'm going to do a 30-minute run and I'm going to try to sort of run in that sort of like second threshold area, you're looking to get to 168 heart rate by the end of that 30 minutes, not in the middle, not at the beginning, or you're just going to end up working that little bit too hard. So today's pretty good. It sort of paints this picture. I'm telling you that this is a really important thing to do, because then it means you're not shooting in the dark. When you're regularly testing your sort of fitness, when you're regularly getting sort of little markers like this, use pace, use heart rate, come to the same place, it means that you can see, did the last sort of 2 to 3 weeks of training work? Did the last sort of 2 to 3 weeks training help you move forward? Can you run at slightly faster paces? Is your heart rate slightly lower? You can do it the way I did it, where I did 5 times 1 lap. You could also just do a progressive run. You could do, I could have just done 5 or 6 miles. I didn't have to stop at the end of every lap. I could have got gradually quicker each lap. And then you can cross compare that with a previous time that you did that exact same thing. Are you now able to run that little bit quicker? Is that heart rate that little bit lower? And more importantly, how did you feel sort of when the pace got quicker? How did you feel sort of during the entire thing? And so I think my fitness is in a pretty okay place. When you're not doing full training, when you sort of would race, you might be a bit vulnerable in a race situation where there's no recovery. That's why sometimes almost doing it as the progressive run style might be slightly sort of closer to race day. One sort of tip I would give you is, once you sort of get those baseline markers, the best thing that I could do next, for example, would be to go put that theory to the test, right? So what you might do is, let's say in 2 to 3 days time, you might do a full tempo run, which is sort of 5-6 miles. If we're saying that this LT2 is the kind of sort of effort that you can hold for, you know, 50 minutes to 1 hour, well then you should have no problem on Thursday, for example, 2 days from now, doing 30 minutes at that heart rate and not struggling. If you can hold it for 50-60 minutes, why on earth would you be struggling after 30 minutes? And so that's putting 4 to 5 times 1 lap, theory to practical, because let's be honest, running is very rarely theory and it's usually always practical. So then you go test it in a practical scenario, 30 minutes in one go. How did you go? Did the heart rate go too high? Did you slow down? Well, then perhaps your LT2 pace isn't, in my case, 4:58 per mile. Maybe it's actually 5:10. Maybe it's actually 5:05. It's not because what you did today is wrong. It's that because today was one lap with recovery, not real life scenario 30 minutes or upwards. But thanks so much for watching. Like, subscribe, do all those lovely things. Check out 262clo.com. That would be fantastic. Running shorts designed specifically for runners with pockets. You can carry everything you need. Well over 1,000 sort of reviews now, sitting at a 4.9 star average, which is pretty awesome. But take care.